Okay, quick. Excuse
Welcome
me.
back. Yes, Yvette, you have a quick question?
Sorry, Williams, I sent you a message in the chat box. Thank you.
All right, and as a reminder, 15 minutes for the presentations, 5 minutes for Q&A, and we'll have some balance of time at the end to ask questions, or if we have a whole bunch of questions for one of the sites, we can keep the momentum rolling. So I will kick it off to Chester. Go ahead. Either Yvette or Miss Williams, whoever wants to get the show rolling.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Yvette Houston. So I am one of the few representatives here for Chester Community Charter School. I'm the grant writer and project manager here at the school. And this afternoon, we are going to discuss one of our most successful programs in our program design, which is youth courts. It's one of 5 programs that we have in this particular grant design. And excited to share more information with you all and give you a little preview of who we are and what we do. So I do have our Chester team here with us, specifically our Aston or middle school team. So I have Principal Patterson. She is our principal for the 6th grade. And is she still here? Principal Patterson, if you could show yourself. She's here just to support and observe. Principal Patterson oversees the youth court program at the Aston building, specifically 6th grade. We also have Mrs. Christine Williams, and she is the youth court lead teacher, and she's been with us since, well, for quite a while, and she's been doing an awesome, fantastic job leading youth courts, not just for her grade level, but also helped push out the training to grade 7 and 8. And then we also have some scholars. We have some scholars who've been participating in our youth court program who are joining us this afternoon, and they're going to share very brief testimonies. Yeah, that's interesting and exciting. I know it took a lot to get that arranged, so thanks in advance to Williams for doing that. And last but not least, we have Greg Volz with us. Greg is the subject matter expert on all things youth courts in Pennsylvania, and specifically for the city of Chester. And Greg has been working with us as a consultant since we were awarded this funding, and he's been an invaluable asset and resource for us. So with that being said, I'm actually going to turn it over to Greg. Greg's going to give us an overview of youth courts, and then Greg will turn it over to Ms. Williams. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm a public interest lawyer. I've been doing youth courts for 15 years. I was funded by the Stoneleigh Foundation in Philadelphia to develop a model for the state of Pennsylvania. And youth courts are an alternative disciplinary system used in schools and used in juvenile justice systems around the country. I feel like it is a platform for youth development and needs to be understood as far more than a disciplinary system, although it is that. It reduces school suspensions and expulsions. And to give you just a few quick numbers, there was a school, middle school in Philadelphia that in 1 year reduced the number of suspensions by 125. They held 125 disciplinary hearings rather than send the student who had made the mistake to the office for whatever the school would have done. A high school over 3 years averted 250 suspensions by the use of one youth court. So it can really blunt the school to prison pipeline. It provides academic, not only is it a disciplinary system, so it helps the kid that got in trouble keep from getting kicked out of school, and it helps them get an education. But the students who run the court, it's usually run in a classroom, and Ms. Williams will talk much more about this than I will. There's 20 students, 25 students in the room, and they learn and acquire academic, socialization, and civic engagement skills, problem solving, creative thinking, teamwork, how to make a decision. A lot of academic stuff goes on. And maybe most important of all, they like doing this. They think it's fun and challenging. And I'm sure Ms. Williams will go into much greater depth than me on that. I've been funded, and I'm working with the Attorney General's office around the state doing youth courts in other places. And I think that's all I want to say about what youth courts are. They employ restorative justice, or at least the way we teach it, they employ restorative justice. We're not concerned with punishing the kid that misbehaved. We're concerned with repairing the harm. That sometimes includes not only dealing with the consequences of their bad act, but helping them figure out by reflecting on what they did so that they don't do that same act in the future. We have a script we use that basically asks the students to follow a format of questioning of the person that got in trouble. And the sequence is facts, harm, and fix it. It's real simple. What are the facts? Who, where, when, what, and why? You know, what happened? What was the harm that was caused by your action? Who did it harm? What was that harm? And then how are we going to fix it? And that's the sequence of youth court. Finally, I want to just briefly touch on the school to prison pipeline. I've been working in this area for a long time. In my personal view, I'm not speaking for the Chester Charter School, but there is a school to prison pipeline. It's a real thing. And you have a crisis in many school districts with public education, and you have a crisis in the juvenile justice system. Pennsylvania last year issued a report after about 18 months of study on how they're going to reform the juvenile justice system so that fewer kids of color are thrown into the system, and more money is spent at the front end of the school to prison pipeline and less money is spent at the back end of the school to prison pipeline. Finally, I just wanted to say, because I think Ms. Williams is the expert. She's the one that's on the ground all the time. But something that I observed that might be useful is that a couple of months after we started, this would have been like January or February of 2020. I have not been back in the school since. I've had a lot of email correspondence and Zoom calls with people since then, but the pandemic's been serious here. But both Miss Moody and Miss Williams, in a matter of a few months, were running a high quality youth court. And when I say high quality, I mean the kids were confident, they were following the scripts, and they were contributing to a better school environment. They achieved all of that in a matter of a few months. Unfortunately, the pandemic has thrown a real curveball into this process, and I don't think the numbers that have been generated are even close to what they would have been if the pandemic hadn't happened. I'll stick around, and if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk today.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that it looks like there were some last minute updates to our original presentation that we submitted to you, James. So the disclaimer slide looks like it's not in there, but I just want to say up front that this program is supported in part by OJJD. Well, it is supported by OJJDP, and that is, you know, our disclaimer. So our slide is not there in space number 2 as it was in the original presentation. Okay, I think we have Ms. Williams and Patterson's in the background.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you just give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen? Wonderful.
Hi, everyone. I'm Miss Williams, and I am the liaison teacher for the youth court program here at Aston campus. And today we're just going to tell you a little bit about why it's so wonderful and successful and why you should implement it wherever you are. So youth court to us is all about increasing scholar voice. Sometimes every perspective in a situation isn't heard, and this is their chance to shine and share their perspective of why the things happened that happened. A lot of times when our scholars find themselves in a sticky situation, it's not because they just acted out for no reason. A lot of times they have a perspective and a story to share, something going on with them that we can help them with. And punishments and suspensions just don't work. What does work is helping them find ways to restore the justice and fix the harm. So we're going to go to the second slide just to talk about the goals of the youth court program here at CCCS. Of course, number one is to increase scholar voice, okay? It helps them with their reading skills. There's a lot of verbiage that is high level and it pushes them to level up. It increases their higher order thinking skills. Not only do they have questions on paper that guide them, but as they get more comfortable, they can ask questions that allow a respondent or the person that is in trouble to reflect on their actions, which in turn help them have self-reflection, which is number 3. It allows them to be vulnerable. Sometimes they just, they don't feel like they're allowed to be heard. So sometimes it decreases vulnerability. So we want to increase that. Of course, teamwork, they have to work as a team to have a successful courtroom and a trial or a hearing. Active listening, making sure that they don't repeat the same questions that other people have already done, which is a skill we all need to work on sometimes. And speaking clearly. In a public speaking setting, sometimes that's hard, you know, and it gives them the confidence to do so. Our second goal is to decrease suspension rates, you know, and replace that with restorative consequences for them. We can reduce punishment based consequences, and we can fix the initial harm caused by assigning restorative consequences that help them fix the behavior, find out why they're doing what they do, reflect on that, and change for the better in the future. And number 3, we need to address where the behavior originates, kind of what I already said. Here at our school, we serve a lot of people, a lot of scholars that go through trauma and different frustrations that sometimes they just don't have the skills to, they haven't acquired the skills to face that. And this program really helps them with that. And 3, of course, inspire change. That's pretty much my why as a teacher, to inspire change in this community. It's important to me. And I want to increase scholar awareness, scholar confidence, and scholar success. So we address all perspectives of a different historical event. So it's educational, it's social emotional, it's everything that you can think. It inspires reflection and evidence-based reasoning for the respondent who is in trouble and the jury who asks questions. The next slide, change begins with us. That's part of our morale here. We really begin that change begins with our school community. So we have some outcomes that we set up to meet, and we've definitely done that. Students will learn the judiciary process. A lot of times, if our scholars have been in the courtroom, it wasn't because of a good experience. So they get to see the other side of things and learn how to act in that way. And they get to learn all the different roles of a courtroom. It's great. 2, students will become empowered to participate in improving school climate and will acquire conflict resolution skills. Sometimes scholars don't feel like they have power, and giving them the power can be positive, and they can positively affect change themselves. And it also takes some of the burden off us as educators and leadership. And 3, program participation will reduce disciplinary infractions, specifically out of school suspensions. We don't want to do that anymore. We want to make it better by fixing the harm, just as I mentioned before. All right. And I'll talk a little bit about the hearings. Okay. The hearings are all scholar-led, especially at this point. We set them up through a couple of different lessons in the beginning, but at the end, I sit back and they run their courtroom. We have them twice a week in each grade, addressing real behaviors and real referrals in our school. So instead of facing a suspension or a punishment, a scholar can choose to come to youth court and share their story with their peers. And then their peers assign the respondent dispositions or consequences to fix the harm that they caused. And then the respondent is responsible for completing that disposition, or they can be referred back to leadership. We have scholar mastered positions in these hearings. They know the judge position in a courtroom. They know how to be a jury foreperson, which is, and low key, have control of the courtroom. They know the bailiff. They know how to be a youth advocate. They know how to stand up for someone and make sure someone gets a fair trial by being their lawyer. And then we have a room full of jury members that ask questions to try and hear the respondent's side of the story. During these hearings, students practice skills needed in real life, like I said before: active listening, speaking clearly, conflict resolution, higher order thinking, reflection on their behavior, and evidence-based reasoning. I have some scholar testimony, so I'm going to hand it over to one of my scholars, Yesha, and she's going to tell you a little bit about her experience in youth courts.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Yesha, and I'm here to read my testimony. To me, youth court means to teach kids about the reality of life, to learn how to control and know how a real courtroom works, to take responsibility. The youth court program helped me by encouraging me to speak in front of people, to start taking responsibility for the mistakes I made. The way I could use youth court to change our school community by teaching scholars to take responsibilities for their actions. My favorite part of youth courts is being the youth advocate for the respondent. I like to be there to help he or she and explain to them the questions that are being asked.
Okay, we're going to pass it over to Lisa Ramsey.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Lisa, and my favorite part of, I like youth court because it gives scholars a chance to feel like they could share their side of the story instead of like leadership just hearing this teacher's perspective. Kids feel comfortable sharing their stories with their peers as well. I like being the youth advocate. It gives me a chance to meet other students in my school and also help them hear their side of the story.
And Anaya.
Good afternoon. My name is Anaya. I like youth courts because people listen to our stories. I like being the judge because I am the type of person who doesn't judge others quickly, and my strong personality always allows me to control the court.
So that is our scholar testimony. I'm sure people have questions, so we can open the floor to everyone and see if you have any questions for us, scholars or educators or Greg.
Thank you to the scholar participants.
It was great to hear your voice. Thank you so much. Anybody on the line of questions for Chester? What are some of the typical cases that you all are hearing?
Is that for I'll answer and then I'll let them answer too. So he said, what are some of the typical cases that you're hearing? So you know how we see level 1 and 2 infractions. So there's 3 tiers of infractions. So we see level 1 and 2. So it starts off with easier, I guess, cases, and then it gets more and more in depth where the students need to be more mature as they grow. Do you want to speak on some of the cases? Like, you can't really, what happens in youth court stays in youth courts, but what kind of cases do you see? Go ahead.
I see cases where scholars would like to actually share their side of the story because sometimes scholars don't always get their side of the story heard or get their side of the story heard or was able to speak up for themselves because they felt like they couldn't.
Okay, can you tell him like what kind of case, like what kind of
Behavior.
thing? Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay, so he wants to know what kind of trials do you see? So what typically does someone is in trouble for when they come to youth courts? Go ahead.
So normally, a lot of times we do see, like when kids come in, when we do like real youth court, there's a lot of times when people was arguing with somebody or like they hit somebody and they come to youth court instead of them just getting straight in trouble and they get another chance.
So sometimes it could cutting class, arguments, like she said, play fighting, disrespecting the teacher, or maybe walking out. So like level 1 and 2.
Thank you very much, Judge.
That's you.
Yes, we have another question.
This is for the scholars as well. Do you experience, because you sit on this court with your peers, Have you experienced any type of, I guess, conflict with the peers that you're judging? Or has it become a problem?
Good question.
Sometimes like when we tell them they not talking loud enough, they do sometimes get a little mad. But we just want to hear where like their answer. Like if we ask them a question, they do get mad sometimes when we tell them to speak up because we can't hear them.
Yesha wanted to say something too, I think. Or whatever you wanted to say.
I've never had any like nasty or like some type of
Negative.
negative attitude towards anybody in the respondent's place, because I feel like they are nervous, so they might not want to speak up or say what they have to say. But sometimes there are a lot of scholars that want to speak up.
Do you all ever have any of your peers who look at you in a nasty or negative way because you're in a position to give them a disposition? Yes. Yes.
Probably so. I had a couple because I was trying to help them and they looked at it in a different way.
Okay, how did you handle that?
I had to explain. I talked personally to them with a leadership team member. I had to explain to them why I gave the jury foreperson, youth advocate, and judge. I had to explain to them why it was a good disposition, because sometimes dispositions will not always work because they might not want to do it, but I had to like break it down why I gave it
Good.
this.
Excellent conflict resolution skills there. Thank you. And young lady, you had a response as well?
So when I sit in a jury, sometimes I be hearing them make like their consequences, and I don't like them all the time. I don't agree with them all the time, but I do have to like agree with the other kids because it's just me against all of them. So if I say something, everybody might be like, we don't like that. Like I just stick with it because it's not me who's doing the consequence.
So you have to compromise.
I have to
Right.
compromise.
Yeah. See, you all are now peer leaders in your school and at your grade level, and that's a great opportunity, but sometimes that also comes with challenges in the way you're viewed by your other peers. You know, what they may call it, sometimes other peers are just hating because you're in leadership positions that they have not yet accessed for whatever reason. So I applaud all of you for maintaining your leadership positions under such pressure, in addition to your schoolwork and things of that nature. So that's really good. That's a good skill you're developing at an early age. James, it looks like we have a few questions in the chat box.
Yeah, there was one from Sierra about if the court occurs during school or after school, and maybe looks like the principal, Ms. Patterson, you said that happens during school.
Yeah.
Is it in place of class, or is it like during a specific period, or how does that work?
All right, so it's part of our social studies curriculum. It's kind of like interweaved into it. So I try, and I think it's amazing. So I use it a lot. And so I interweave it about once a week. So all of my classes have learned how to do this. So every single student that I've ever taught has been trained in all of the positions. So it's interwoven into our curriculum.
Right.
Awesome.
Well done.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Chester. Thank you very much, scholars. You guys are incredible leaders. Thank you very much for the work that you do at Chester and being examples to your fellow students. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks to the Chester team. Thanks, Patterson, Williams. Thank you, Greg. And thank you to our wonderful scholars.
Bye now.
Oh, All right, we're gonna switch gears, and we're gonna turn it over to Spokane. Last year, they presented an amazing presentation. Oscar and Nicole and Rebecca, you guys were superstars, talking about your equity resolution. And now we're gonna get an update and hear how things are going. Now you're into what, year 1 or year 2? I guess year 2 of the equity resolution. So I'm gonna share the screen and let you guys present.
Thank you.
All right, let's see if I can switch it to slideshow.
Well, while we get the screen going, so I am Nicole Jenkins Rosenkrantz, and I am the Director of Community Relations and Diversity Training. And we are umbrellaed under the Department of Family and Community Engagement. And then also, Dr. Harris, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yes, Oscar Harrison. I'm the Chief Family and Community Engagement Officer for Spokane Public Schools. So glad to be back. I see some familiar faces. So glad to have this Zoom family reunion.
And you all see the slides, right?
I don't see them. Does anyone else see the slides?
What? What do you guys see?
You.
Me. What the heck? Share screen. Oh, maybe if I do the right screen, that would help.
That's why I
What?
had you drive it, because I knew that was going to happen with me.
Thanks a lot. Make me look bad. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. All right, you see the screen now?
Yes.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, next slide, please. And as with all of us, our RISE program that Becca talked about yesterday and that we'll be talking about a little bit today we are very thankful to be funded through the OJJDP grant. So to kind of recap about our equity resolution. So our Spokane Public Schools vision is excellence for everyone through equity. And that vision statement actually changed this year. Our board redid our mission and our vision statement. And so our mission statement used to just say excellence for everyone. And so they added through equity in the respect that we need to be using the equity lens in everything that we do in the best interest of our students and families. So responding to the moment and planning for the future. Next slide, please. So as we go through kind of describing a few of the components, some things are in progress, some things are finalized, some things we're implementing, and some things are completed. But I do want to just recap again that this wasn't, unfortunately, my magic wand is still broken. And so this has taken a lot of years for this to come about. So back in 2017, we had a lot of parents and community stakeholders really pushing the district for making changes using the equity lens. And then when we had everything kind of explode, in 2020, whether we want to talk about the pandemic or social unrest, that's when the equity resolution was drafted, and then the board signed it in 2021. And so this 2021-22 school year is when we begun implementing our goals. Next, please. So I'm not going to read everything on the slide, but I do want to go over the objectives that we have. So establish an equity policy that requires new employees to participate in anti-racism and cultural responsive training before working with students. So what we did was we developed a kind of an anti-racism 101 training that every single staff that comes through our district will experience in their onboarding. And then with that, it also shows them that we are going to be having further trainings, but we just, from the very beginning, it's very important to know, for everyone to know that that's what we're doing. So we have around 4,000 staff. So this would be classified and certificated staff. So everyone does receive this training. And then establish an equity policy and refine planning that ensures anti-racism and cultural responsiveness training continues with current staff and requires all staff to regularly participate. So even with our equity policy, we knew that, again, we needed our stakeholders at the table with us. And so as we were drafting the policy to present to the board, and the board was also advising us on kind of the things that they wanted in it, we had parents, community members, our community groups, all coming to the table and legit helping us write it, like typing up what they wanted to make sure was in it. And then the board looked at it, made some tweaks, and that was also implemented. Next slide, please.
And also in line with the equity resolution, we also had the objective of implementing additional structures to increase student voice, specifically around collecting racial incidents regarding racism and et cetera. And I think something to back up that's very important to mention is when you look at the demographics of the Spokane area, I absolutely love the area. But if you look up the demographics, you're going to see that as far as diversity is concerned, people coming from various ethnic backgrounds, people considered to be BIPOC, in Spokane, we're probably less than 10% of the total population of probably almost 500,000. So that kind of puts in perspective in terms of what we're talking about, and that is something unique for an area like this. But we was able to implement those structures, and we used specific surveys to kind of get student voice, as well as hear from other parents and community members, and looked at additional structures that we can actually bring forward to actually make sure that, you know, complaints as well as concerns could actually reach administrative staff at the district office. Another point was advance equitable student-centered learning by providing, you know, cultural connections to curriculum. Something that's very popular and that's probably definitely on the East Coast is the universal design for learning. Is something that we pretty much adopted this year during the last couple of years during the pandemic, and worked intensively on being able to mainstream our students that was that have IEPs and et cetera, to make sure that they was getting a full experience of the high school socially and various other things. And we've seen great success in those particular areas. And that's another one of the equity elements that we was really targeting the last few years. Next slide, please. Another one is we was looking to implement research-based social emotional learning curriculum with an emphasis on wellness and anti-racism as key factors for students and staff success. Similar to most people on here, we started and looked at, you know, implementing new strategies right when the pandemic happened, but just so happened we had already been working with Character Strong as far as a social emotional learning curriculum, and we had started to implement it, as well as working on our advisory structures to make sure that students was having the opportunity to really spend time with each other, as well as to begin to start talking about the elements of SEL that is very important and that could help build, you know, that resilience in students and et cetera. Another thing that we looked at is how do we prioritize resources and training to ensure high levels of inclusion. That was another thing with UDL, as well as us looking at, you know, curriculum, how we was implementing it, as well as making sure that we was tapping into all our stakeholder groups, really getting input, feedback. And something else that I can tell you that's been very much so part of a culture shift within Spokane Public Schools is we're very highly attentive, you know, I'll say with a balance with families and parental and voice is very important. And most things that we do, we end up doing with stakeholder involvement. It calls for, literally have to slow down and rebuild the culture, but we're very excited to be able to say that any and everything that we do, we have such a high level of buy-in, it makes the stuff so much easier. It took about 4 or 5 years to get here, but we're appreciative of it right now. Next. Okay, is this me or you, Nicole? Oh, I think this me. Exciting stuff. Something else that we were able to do over the course of the last year or two is invest in development. We call it personal color-led multicultural club in every one of our schools. As a district, we have 54 different schools, and we have around 30,000 students. And the ideal of being able to bring in multicultural clubs into all those schools was something that we very much so was excited about the potential of being able to do. And of course, we was a little nervous given specific things that was happening around the time that we was trying to do this. But to date, I can give an update to say that after we developed what the model is, as well as got the proper stakeholder buy-in, out of our 54 schools, we probably have around 30 schools that's actually implementing them right now or in the planning stage. And I think our goal for this year was to only have 10. So we were way ahead of our schedule, so excited about that. Another thing that we was looking at is how do we implement a practice that enhanced oversight of exclusionary discipline assigned to students. Similar to when we talked about the restorative justices, this really fell in line with us looking at restorative practices as a district. And a model that we actually developed as a district is we have one person who is our restorative practices manager who's responsible for outlining programming and training district-wide, as well as we have this individual tasked with being a particular ombuds person for the district that parents can actually call if they need help navigating challenging situations, somebody to walk alongside them. And in addition to that, what we did just in case a parent or a guardian actually approached the school district and didn't feel as if they could get that neutral facilitator, that unbiased perspective. We also recruited individuals from the community, trained them, offered them a stipend of which, and have them on call. So if we have a family to say that, you know what, you work for the district, this is not fair, and we can't depend on you or trust you, that we can actually lean upon somebody who's well respected in the community. So we're very excited about that. Next slide, Nicole, that's you.
Okay, so establish ambitious goals for increasing workforce diversity and invest resources in recruitment and retention strategies. So with this one, we had planned to hire a person of color-led consulting company. But what happened was actually a wonderful surprise, is that the Gates Foundation gave, I think it was 2 districts, $1 million. And it was as a result of our pandemic response, following the data and the health guidelines for return. And so with that, we were able to work with TNTP, and I can't remember what they stand for, so they have been walking alongside us in developing new ways of looking at increasing our pools, and they used our data from before and are enhancing our work moving forward. One of the great outcomes that we're currently in the process of is we're working on a pipeline into our schools from our students. So it'd be, they go from, students. So we start talking to them in the high school, while they're in high school, about maybe their ambitions. And for those that might have interest in education, we could give them it's kind of like a letter of intent. So they graduate, they can be a para educator. So they're getting that experience while they're going to school. And then from that, they can get another letter of intent to hire. So we would be doing, using homegrown. So our students that are in our schools and able to just give them a pipeline into being able to come back and work for us. And so that's very exciting. And then also for our current paras who have interest in becoming teachers. So also working with them. And with that also includes having kind of a teacher mentor to help them as they navigate the pathway through their education and into a teaching position. And then also enhance the process of receiving and addressing student and family concerns around reporting racial discrimination. And so I want to piggyback off of what Oscar was talking about with the ombuds process, and it also involving community members. So not only are we working on revising our policy and procedures, one of the issues that was brought to our attention was that there wasn't really a direct way to deal with racial incidences that happen. And what we would use was the blanket civility policy, and that still wasn't quite addressing the deeper needs. So just to give a quick example of, we had a teacher who said something that was offensive to a staff of color based on her limited knowledge of that cultural background. And that ended up going to HR for discipline. And then I was able to actually develop a one-on-one training with this teacher who did the misstep. And so she still had to deal with the consequences of what happened. But part of that was actually training and helping her have a deeper understanding of the culture where she was incorrectly stereotyping. And so I found that an interesting experience for me, but also watching that teacher grow and meeting her where she was at was also an amazing opportunity as well. Next slide, please. So in our department, we have two big sayings. One is surface your brilliance. So we really match folks to tasks based on where their passion and brilliance is. And then we also, we don't use the word challenges. We use the word opportunities. Now, I'll have to admit, when Oscar first brought that to us, I thought something was wrong with him because I was very stressed out at all of the challenges. But reframing it to opportunities really is, it gives us hope. And so I appreciate that. And then we're just going to talk about these three areas very quickly. So Oscar, I'll let you do the safety model.
So as it relates to our safety model, so something I should share is background information. We talked about the school to prison pipeline. About 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, we end up starting to change our safety model. And that year that we changed our safety model to begin to really start focusing on restorative practices, we moved suspensions and arrests from down from the previous year, 700 down to less than 100 in 1 year. And so restorative practices all day works in terms of different things like that. Also, things that we did in particular, our model that we had at that particular time is that we hire our own security staff. And at that time, they was commissioned by, the police department in particular. With the change in our model, we've kind of moved a little bit away from that. And we wanted our safety staff to have an even more softer look to them. And we want them to focus on the element of safety that they was not just qualified to do, but what made sense within an educational environment. And what that meant was, how do you look at the equipment? How do you look at the student safety? And how do we begin to start delineating what does it mean and what is your capability within a school to provide safety? And when do we actually involve law enforcement that's going to come in within a particular role? So whenever you're talking about changing and having systemic change like that, especially like what's happening on the political front, the cool thing about being in Spokane and what we was doing, regardless what was happening in the political front, we was a year or two ahead of all of the different rhetoric. A year or two ahead of all of that. And so when individuals start talking about elements about, are you talking about defunding police? Absolutely not. We need police officers. We need them. We need police officers. We need safety specialists. We need schools to be safe. We need trauma-informed practices. We need restorative practices. So how do we bring all these together and not allow for the political narrative of the nation of which individuals using to openly affect our kids and them being able to be successful in the environment, regardless to what type of trauma that they have experienced. And so with that, I can tell you we did experience some pushback, and uniquely because of the level of success that we have, we released preliminary numbers the last few months, and it was quite shocking to individuals, the type of safety that's going on and how students are really gel with the model and all that stuff. But we're yet in a place to where, dealing with the national narrative, we got to continue to look at what it means to unify and what do it means to have everybody come to the table on a consistent basis and say, hey, this is the deal. Everything we're talking about don't matter, but what matter is, are our kids safe? How do we keep our kids safe? And so we've been given some great opportunities to talk with the media a little bit, not trying to a lot, as well as to talk with local reps about different things in this particular area.
Thank you. And so as far as community and parent engagement, so I really feel like our department the backbone of all the work that we do really surrounds the importance of purposeful relationship. And I know at times it has felt overwhelming when community members show up with issues and us thinking, well, you just, if you only knew what we were actually doing, or, just really, we have to meet about this again. But actually what's come from that is that now we have this level of trust. So we continue to show up at the table, even when it was very conflictual. And even our RISE program was developed through community and parent engagement, right? So they showed up complaining about the numbers, complaining about disproportionality, complaining about our resources. And from that, we were able to look for solutions. And then with that, they have come along with us. So we have a steering committee for our RISE program. And again, like some of those folks that are in the committee are the ones that originally went with me to Georgetown University to learn how to do an in-school diversion. So it's very, it's felt very just heartwarming for them to be able to see we listened, and this is what we've developed, and this is how we've made those impacts. And then also with the RISE program and the whole child mentoring, which some of the other sites had mentioned as well, is that, we could just focus on the student, but the student still is a part of a whole different environment than maybe when they're with us. So similar to two-generation monitoring. So, and then also we've been able to expand our mentoring programs. So OJJDP does support our full-time mentors, but we also have, because of the success, we're able to have another side grant that supports some part-time mentors. And then on top of that, our board gave us the directive to come up with an outline for our volunteer mentor program. And so that is up and running as well. And Rebecca, who you all know, has also been instrumental in getting that piece going too. And then Oscar, moving forward.
So moving forward, one thing that, I'll say that I'm optimistic about and just excited, extremely excited about, is that the work that has been done, we have an opportunity because of the level of buy-in to get a level of sustainability that was very, that honestly was something that we very much so were thinking about before receiving the grant. Because of the type of success that we're seeing and the fact that, all stakeholders are involved, we believe that, it's been positive that our district as a school district is going to continue to divert funds this way. And we believe also that we're going to continue to attract certain specific funders that have an interest in actually giving to some of the things we're doing. With that being said, if anybody on the line know about some hundreds of thousands just hanging out there somewhere, don't hesitate to email me. I'll take it. So let me be careful. You'll be like, well, he doesn't need it. Yes, we will take it if you have access to it. But I do think something that has really helped us is not just a passion for the work, but I think we've been able to start building this collective understanding that all of us are in it, not just to win it, but all of us are in it to win it as a collective group for everybody that's involved. And so it's amazing to be able to sit at the table with people who you still may not like. I mean, and let me put this in there, and some people gonna catch it. I mean, you still let the people come to the barbecue you don't like. I don't know about y'all, but where I'm from, you still let them come. You just watch them and make sure they don't take all the food with them when they leave. That's all you do. But that's something that I think is very important. So moving forward, a big effort that we're going to continue to look at is what do it means to unify, and what do it means to encourage individuals to take courage and stand on what we know is right, to stand on what makes sense in light of what's going on, coming out of a pandemic, endemic, whenever we get a chance to do that. What do it mean for us to keep supporting all of our kids? When I say all of our kids, every one of our kids. 98% is a high number and it's something to be praised, but 100 is the target. So celebrate for a little while at the barbecue, but let's get up and get back at it. And I think that's what we at right now, is re-envisioning what do it mean, what can we do to keep the momentum going, and how we can continue to bring people to the table who maybe wouldn't necessarily be at the table in times past.
All right, thank you.
As always, super inspiring. And, kind of the couple of takeaways that I got from this is that, engaging the community first, building the relationships, understanding what it is that you want to achieve, and being outcomes focused and having that information is critical to blunt, the national pressures, the national narrative coming out, but to more importantly, make sure that you have that investment in the community so you can continuously move forward and not only attract public dollars, but it sounds like you are able to attract private dollars through the Gates Foundation. So these are all the things that I hope all sites really heard. And I know that you spoke briefly about the RISE program that Rebecca often mentions, the restorative interventions for suspensions and expulsions. Recently, I had a chance to partake in one of your task force meetings and listened to Sierra, Jeremy, Laura, and Boris and the work that you all do. And man, like, we don't get to do site visits. And, I feel like site visits often fill my tank and, make me get all excited. But that meeting really filled the tank. And hearing the work that you all do, and you all do it differently. You all have different personalities, and you utilize those different personalities to engage your students so beautifully. So, I'm just always impressed with the work that you guys are doing in Spokane, and kudos to you. I want to open it up to questions. I don't want to take all this time. I know folks have questions for you.
I have a question. First of all, that was an awesome presentation. Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, Nicole. I was rapidly taking notes while you guys were talking. I want to be invited to your barbecue. One of my social workers is here with me. But no, really, when I'm thinking about you guys talking about your inclusion rates and how you want to increase your inclusion rates, how are you measuring that? Like, I mean, beyond looking at disproportionality rates, how are you guys measuring that?
Okay, so when you say inclusion, I know I talked specifically about students with IEPs and et cetera. So the universal design for learning, it really helps, I'll say, instructors as well as the whole school culture to begin to start thinking about how do we embed inclusion within the inclusionary efforts throughout the school day within your total school programming. Inclusion, if I was to take it and begin to start talking about as it relates to racial or cultural elements, inclusion, at the basic level, I share with some school buildings that want to talk with me directly, and this is an area that I think I consider Nicole to be an expert in. I share with them as a basic level that when I walk into a school, it takes me 5 seconds to know whether or not that place is a place that's welcoming for people who come from my background. 5 seconds. And then they ask the question, how would you know that? I say, as soon as I walk in, I can see the artwork. I can see how individuals greet me in the front office. And as soon as I figure out those things, I can tell you what my experience is going to be in that building. And I'm rarely wrong. Many people shaking their head because they experience the same thing. And so I tell them, first thing you do, you start right there. I mean, you want to look at inclusion. When someone walks in the door, I mean, there's nothing wrong with having, a diversity of pictures put up and everything. You have to change the pictures out sometimes because I love Albert Einstein being on the wall and a few others, but you got to mix it up a little bit. You got to mix it up a little bit. Did I answer your question, Mackenzie?
I mean, yes and no, because I mean,
Okay.
that's a great answer.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I didn't know if when you're talking about increasing those inclusion rates, if there's some way you're measuring that, and maybe there's not, because I don't know.
No, so something that we do as a district, thank you for bringing that out in particular. We do what is called a panorama survey. You're probably familiar with that in particular. So we survey our students, we survey our staff, and we survey our parents multiple times throughout the year. They actually get tired of us. We do it so often, to be honest. I think I get tired of us. We do it so honestly, now that I think about it. But we take time to do those particular type of things to really see how students are feeling about their school, how parents are feeling about their school, how staff are feeling about their school and stuff. So we do those particular type of things to get that qualitative data.
And the other piece I would add to that is, I know you said besides data, but we're very data driven. And so an example, so one of my hats in my role is I went personally to all 54 of our schools, and they were showing me their data. So their data on their discipline rates, their inclusion rates, their IEP data as well. And with that, I was able to talk to them about what kind of trainings they're doing next year. And so I helped them. So I did it this year, starting in January, as they start looking at what they're going to be training on next year. And so it really is, we really use data for everything. And I know that folks, some folks, get tired of hearing about data, and the data says, but what that is that's what your protection is. So why are you changing the way that you're doing things? Oh, well, our data shows when we were doing it this way, this is where we were at. However, when we started responding in real time to things based on data, there was this. We have some school principals who look at the data every day, and they have special systems set up where they know if a kid in a behavior class, a BI class, is blowing out. And so like, oh, okay, so what kind of systems, multi-tiered systems of supports that someone's presentation was talking about. So we use that quite a bit as well. So it really is, although it's data focused, it's in real time action.
Thank you, guys. Loved your presentation. Thank you.
I had a question. Well, a couple actually. Firstly, I loved everything you all would say. So a couple of things. One is, can I attend Nicole's training on, are you letting other people come to see what that looks like? So we could think about whether we can do something similarly in some way, shape or form, for our new staff or for our staff. So I don't know if that's possible. So that's one question. Second is, I don't know if you could kind of spoke a lot to like racial identity, but also like other identities. How are you working with, like gender identity, sexual identity, things like that? How are you integrating that into the work that you're doing? Love to hear it.
So about the training, I have a probably yes. So, which means that I can just share it with you. But I also want you to know that we are in the process of developing a training that will be part of our Safe Schools training that we will be sharing with any district that has an interest. And the point of it is, and you would actually be able to use that training. The point of it is that not all districts have maybe the funding or the ability to have that type of training. And so our superintendent, like with the intention of being able to share it worldwide, whoever wants it. And so I would really say probably I would suggest we hold tight for that one, because that one will be one that you could just actually use rather than, yeah. Okay. And then as far as the other identities, we also, we have specific clubs that are addressing that as well. Oscar, did you have anything to add to that piece? That was the only thing that I could.
And I know within our student service department, when we begin to start talking about gender identities specifically, a lot of work was being put in the last few years with our student service department. And so even within our department, we're intertwined, intermeshed, and so we're partnering a lot around different things, and we try to match, as Nicole said, individuals' brilliance, which is defined openly. Find your area of passion, begin to start connecting with the areas that you flow into best, and allow for you to do your work. We have individuals who have a brilliance as far as supporting families from different other racial identities, as well as gender backgrounds in particular, that we really like to connect them with. But all of us are cross-trained in what each other does. Right, we just have people who specialize.
So I'm sure we have more questions for Spokane, but I do want to make sure that we give Rebecca and Austin her full 20 minutes. So if you have other questions for Spokane, feel free to put them in the chat. Oscar, I know you were asking for millions. So Office of Justice Programs, they have this 2 terrific websites. One of them talks about funds that they're thinking about releasing. And then the one underneath that is funds that are released. So over the next several weeks, They're going to be rolling out a number of federal solicitations. So I encourage you all to bookmark that website. And if something pops up that looks interesting and you are interested, feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to talk you through it or point you in the direction of somebody who is well versed in that.
Thanks, James, and you can come to the barbecue.
Let me know when and where. I will make that happen. Don't worry. And I will bring my own container.
But can he bring food home? That's the question, right?
That's why I'm bringing my container.
Yeah, right, James. All right.
I know. I want to make sure I get the big container, not the little ones that, some folks, All right. Rebecca, Austin, go ahead. Thank you.
Hey, y'all.
Hey,
Can you hear me? Yay.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to introduce and talk a little bit, and then Eastbach is going to catch us up on anything that I missed. I was also asked her if she could talk a little bit and highlight the work she's doing to shift school culture. So I thought that was a really great piece that Oscar added about how that's also a measurement tool that we can use. And James, you made me feel bad, like I'm taking time from their awesome presentation for my wimpy little talk. Okay. So I know we spoke a bit about youth trauma yesterday in our session, and I just wanted to kind of highlight what we saw, why we needed support for this in Austin, how we utilize the CYVP resources, what we're planning, what some outcomes we're seeing, all of that kind of stuff. And so before I start, I did want to highlight that I am going to be speaking about trauma. So just as a little bit of a warning, and we've all seen this in our schools and spaces, maybe we've seen it in ourselves and our families as well. And then also very thankful for the funding from OJJDP, and thankful to have y'all as part of our team. Okay. So in our district and on our team, we always discuss youth trauma and trauma that is happening to our school staff. These are not two separate occurrences for us, if that makes sense. We all are living in a really heavy world right now. We can't forget that we as the adults are also moving through our own trauma at a personal, local, immediate level, and in our own cities, states, nationally, and globally, okay? So we're all exposed to trauma through the media and in multiple other ways. And I highlight media because we now have terms like doom scrolling, vicarious trauma, secondary trauma stress, right? All of those things. And so sometimes the things that we see and witness in our lives trigger things within ourselves. This has been amplified through the pandemic. We were all in survival mode for so long, and we all took in more information than we've ever really taken in before. Decisions needed to be made to keep ourselves safe and alive, and our reptilian brains were heightened, okay? So this goes for the adults and our youth alike. And now that we've moved into more in-person learning and experiences in our communities, even just going to a grocery store or traveling or visiting restaurants, working in person again, it's exhausting and it's presented more challenges than we could ever imagine, right? So it is imperative that we as the adults are aware of our own triggers and our own personal capacities when we're working with youth. Just wanted to highlight that before moving forward, but we can keep that in mind. Also, we talk about PTSD, and the P for post in PTSD implies that we are past some of our traumatic events that we're experiencing. And for some of our students who are currently living through ACEs experiences, they are not past anything. Okay, they're still very much in it. We like to zoom in a little bit to our own trauma and experiences and zoom out and kind of give that global and national lens. All right, and then I wanted to highlight real quick before I pass to Eastbach for culture, and then I'll answer some questions that I thought of for y'all. So recently the CDC and the US Department of Health and Human Services highlighted the effects of racism in the mental health field. Okay, they noted that systemic, institutional, interpersonal, internalized, and systems of oppression are all a part of a mental health crisis because racism causes trauma. in our district has an entire professional learning session around the history of race and racism in Austin, Texas, and Austin ISD. So I would encourage you to look up statistics in your own area, your schools, your districts, because these definitely have an impact on our school systems and the students that we're aiming to serve. Isak, would you like to add anything, or would you like to pop in about school culture, anything? You're on mute still. Right. There you go.
Sorry, it wasn't letting me unmute. Definitely, I think it's a very layered and large task to take on, right? For us, we exist within, Crockett High School, which is in a historically Latinx and Black community. Covington, we have ALC, which is where students get sent when they get in trouble. And so it's part of the work that we do is how do we shift the campus culture from a Western judicial system of punishment to a restorative culture, right? And with our team in particular, we are moving through culturally proficient, anti-racist restorative practices, right? And what that means is that we cannot be culturally proficient in restorative practices unless, and this is a big deal for me, unless we are honoring the indigenous roots of restorative practices, right? And that means a lot to me as a person of indigenous descent, right? A lot of restorative practice and restorative justice, what's happened historically is that it has been, the indigeneity of that practice has been erased, right? And so we come into these practices not knowing, how does this come from ceremony? How was this done within indigenous communities? And so within indigenous communities, right, indigenous reconciliation, it's really indigenous reconciliation. It's not justice. Indigenous reconciliation is how do we repair and restore relationships through community, right? So that means if I harmed somebody, it's not just me and the person I harmed, it's me, the person I harmed, their mother, their father, their grandfather, their aunties, maybe their siblings. And now I see the impact of how that harm created a ripple within the community. And it's not just me being held accountable, it's also my aunties, my grandma, my mom, who can then share how that wounded them, right? To see me cause harm. And so trying to bring that into a school system, and I also just want to name that school systems are, I'm just gonna say it, right, have been developed and founded on systems of white supremacy, right? And so trying to shift campus culture and move through the lens of, let's honor these indigenous roots, let's honor cultural proficiency is incredibly difficult, and it's also incredibly slow work, right? It's not something that 2 years or 3 years, this is going to be done. This is like, maybe at year 7, then you're going to start seeing those shifts, right? Then you're going to start seeing like, oh, okay, people are practicing this, we're having more awareness. And so we're really trying to move through that lens of awareness. We have to racialize these things because, like Rebecca was saying, there is racial trauma, right? And there's generational trauma. And we might not always be 100% aware of it because at some point we kind of have to turn it on to exist in the systems we exist in. And so part of it is also creating the spaces on campus where people can have conversations about race. And we do that in particular within our students organized against racism class. And so they are having conversations about, well, how does this impact me as a white student? How does this impact me as a Black student? How does this impact me as a student of color, right? And we start having those conversations, right, to address that trauma. But before we can even address trauma, right, there's that tier 1 system within restoration. We can't just dive into tier 2, tier 3, because that's just going to cause more harm and it's going to cause more trauma, and there's going to be so much wounding. And so tier 1, again, when we go back to indigenous practices, is all about working at the communal level. We cannot repair harm without first building community, because most of the time harm was caused because we weren't in relationship with that person to begin with, right? Because when we enter these community building circles, we enter not knowing each other. So you might have a central question that's like, who's a person in your life who really created an impact, who really held you up, right? And if I can see, oh, you know what, Derek is over there being vulnerable and crying because he's talking about his grandmother and how he lost his grandmother and how she was so important with him. And I had beef with Derek earlier, but you know what, I don't really want to fight him. I don't want to fight him now because I love my grandma too. right? And so when we give opportunities for relationship building, it creates less opportunity for people to fight each other. You're less willing to hit somebody that maybe now you see as a human. So there's this very layered, I think, practice that, again, is very slow work. And again, we exist in these systems that are based on white supremacist values. So there's that quality of urgency, like it has to be done now. And we're gonna fix kids. That's like the Western judicial approach. Like, we're not fixing anything. I tell people all the time, I'm not fixing anybody, because by saying that, you are saying that they are inherently broken. And when my kids come to me, I'm like, I'm not here to fix anything, because you're not broken. You have all of the things that you need within yourself. And we just got to bring that forward, right? We need to kind of remember that. And so it's very deeply layered. I think some of the difficulties within school systems is that even when they want to implement restorative culture, and even when they want to make that shift, it's difficult because the district is still very firmly cultivating that Western way of being. So sometimes principals are like, I want to make this change, but within our disciplinary manual within the district, it says we have to do this. And so they start reverting back to those punitive systems of punishment. And so it's very layered. And again, it's also really important for us to name that it's important for us to name that trauma that our teachers are coming in with, right? Because we can do all of the work in regulating our students and getting them to start reflecting and seeing their own growth. But as soon as they go into a classroom where a teacher is not moving from a trauma-informed lens, they're going to re-trigger them. And then 10 minutes later, that kid's back in my room. And so we have to start creating those spaces for teachers to be seen, to have those conversations, to start realizing, oh, what is the racial impact of trauma in my own life? And how do I move through that so I can start then humanizing my kiddos? We also do mediation, but that's, we're trying to work towards sustainability and capacity building. So hopefully by next year, we're going to be training our counselors in mediation, because I'm one person that can't do it all. Unfortunately, I can't do it all. And within restorative practice, you're not supposed to do it all, right? Like, that's a Western way of thinking. In restorative practice, it's not me, it's us, right? You're not outsourcing it to me. You can't just get East back and sprinkle it everywhere and everything's fixed all of a sudden. We are doing this together. And so we are looking to build the capacity of our counselors, but within the SOAR class, our students are learning how to build community building circles. So hopefully they can start facilitating that for other students. They can start facilitating that for teachers. Even within our mediation circles are available to everybody. People think it's like, oh, this kid is acting bad and I want to circle with them. Well, guess what, teacher? If that kiddo feels that you have done something to harm them, they can equally hold you accountable. And that's happened, right? Hey, this teacher said this thing that felt really racist and I want to have a conversation. And I have had those conversations where teachers are just like, but we're not peers. I'm like, I'm sorry, in this circle you are. In this circle, all voices exist equally. And if you want to hold them accountable, then you also have to be willing to be held accountable. So I think, again, it's just a layered approach that, again, I wish this was a 7-year grant. I can talk about it forever, but I won't. So I'll leave it there and I'll pass it back to Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Isa. So we are a team of 2 in Austin ISD, and as you can see, we are small but mighty. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so I wanted to go into a little bit about why we chose the 3 schools that we chose, and then what specifically the resources that support them. So I want to take you back a little bit. The 3 campuses that we chose had principals that have engaged in the work since Austin ISD created their SEL department in 2011. They may have been teachers at the time or like an assistant principal, and they are now the principal at our 3 schools. We also learned a lot from a previous grant from the Department of Education. Our district saw a lot of principal turnover, and we learned that we needed a strong campus leader that can hold the vision for the work. And also Covington Middle School is one of our campuses, and they are a feeder for Crockett Early College High School. So we had that kind of transition and knowing that Covington kids are going to be Crockett kids pretty soon. And then also ALC has always had a high need for students exposed to victimization. Also, Crockett Early College High School was chosen as one of 2 campuses in our high schools in Austin that have the SOAR class. And I've talked about this a little bit. It's the Students Organized for Anti-Racism. And again, Miss Stanley Roy runs that. ESOC goes into support and is helping to coach and train their students into holding restorative circles for peers. And then they also were the one campus in the district, Crockett, that was chosen for an Alateen pilot program through CIS. And so Alateen are teens impacted by family members that are currently in AA and ACA. And so all the reasons that we chose Crockett were they kind of started having these pilot programs going. They started to look at reducing victimization in their schools and their community. We pulled one of their feeder middle school campuses. And then also we were closely connected with ALC, or Alternative Learning Center. Crockett also had a really tight-knit group of practitioners that included their counselors, the licensed mental health professional, an LMHP, an FDL specialist, families as partners rep. They were all really close and really trying to change and shape school culture and climate. So when we started looking at this, it was also a natural fit to kind of add ESOC as a restorative practice associate to that campus culture. Okay, so what does it support? So ALC, or Alternative Schools, we had wanted to do 2 part-time substance abuse counselors on their campus. We had a grant or a contract with Integral Care here in Austin, but their requests were so high during the pandemic, as you could imagine. They also lost staff members during the pandemic. So we were never able to hire our 2 part-time key personnel people for the alternative school. So for next year, we're looking at retaining a staff member that is already doing the work at the campus level for next year. We're also supported with mentoring from Project Nails mentors out of the University of Texas at Austin at all 3 of our schools, and we have communities and schools at all 3 of our campuses. I also wanted to highlight our community stakeholder group. They have really helped us in tremendous ways. We often go to them with some problems that we're seeing at the campus and community level, and they help us co-create solutions for those. So that's another kind of piece that supports our staff and which in turn supports students. Also, I wanted to note that student feedback is taken in for all decisions that are made on campus at Crockett. Our principal was recently recognized by Aspen Institute with the Champions for School Climate Award. And she will often tell you that she has no answers, but her kids do. So she speaks to student groups, fine arts, athletics, student council to find solutions to common problems that we see. And again, knowing that the leader at the campus has got to hold the vision for the work, that's another good piece right there. Okay, so I wanted to talk also about how we identify students to engage with the resources. We have a lot of preventative work here at Crockett. There's some deep SEL and Tier 1 supports that are in place. They also host weekly, we call them ECST, it's like the child study meetings on campus to identify students that need the MTSS Tier 2 and Tier 3 support. The meetings include admin counselors, ESOC joins them, we have some lead teachers, but this is like a proactive way, and it's a way that the campus makes time for that kind of preventative work. So instead of just having behavioral, issues and referrals, on campus, they really take the time to have weekly meetings to identify students like, hey, what's going on with this kid? Or like, hey, did you hear this? Or like, hey, we're seeing this now. Who are their peers? Who are their friends? Who can we get in to support them? Also at Crockett, we have a student equity council group, and I've talked about this before, but they use liberatory design process to identify needs on campus. And then they also use that to identify students to engage in the work. And so there at Crockett, there are local student equity groups, and there's also a district-wide council that has representatives from each high school campus. And so they participate in the liberatory design kind of framework to find solutions to problems and think beyond the punitive punishment for their peers. Talked about that. Okay, and for ALC, we have transition meetings to and from the campus. Those are collaborative meetings with staff, including the CIS rep, teachers, admin, the licensed mental health professionals, the student counselors present, and we have transition specialists, their families, and a lot of times the students join as well. We try to connect them with our mentor groups if they have them at their home campus. And so we try to find ways to kind of bring those supports back to the home campus when they transition away from the alternative school. And when they're transitioning in, we try to connect them with CIS and the mentors and really any other thing we can think of on campus, like trusted adults or like who would be a good fit for a counselor. We talk about all those different pieces. And then I wanted to note, just because Oscar and Nicole mentioned this previously, so our peer-led and student-led groups on our campuses are often students that consider themselves to be in the margins of identity markers. And so we have like a transcendence club, the Student Equity Council, we have a garden club, we have SOAR, we have a teacher club, we have a chess club, we have so many more, but a lot of those students are students of color, the students within the LGBTQI plus community. We have GSA, the Gay Straight Alliance. And so again, a lot of those students find themselves in the margins within identity markers. And having that want, desire, and need for belonging and for their identity to be supported on campus. And then Covington identifies students for their CIS caseload and mentor, and they do a lot of data tracking, looking at behavioral incidents on campus. They also identify student leaders on the campus, and they identify areas where learning takes place at the school. So library, cafeteria, courtyard, outdoor spaces, and they have like kind of like student reps in those spaces that can help kids if they need help. And then I just lastly wanted to highlight 2 outcomes that we're tracking and 2 outcomes that we have achieved so far. We have multiple for each of these, but just to give you new information and to give you an idea. So one of the outcomes we're tracking for next year, ESOC mentioned it, but discussing counselors, going through a training for tier 3 support, for mediation support. Again, as we're thinking of sustainability, after the grant is over next year. It's an area that's been requested by counselors, and the need has also been seen by admin. Also, our counselors' referral numbers have skyrocketed this year, if you could imagine that. They're also doing multiple jobs on campus as districts are losing funding and positions are being cut, and everybody kind of has to take a piece of what's happening. We always say, this work is massive, and we all play a part. We believe in the 7 core assumptions that we have all the people that we need to make positive change happen and occur in our schools. We also have found a need for next year. We have SEL and CP&I, cultural proficiency and inclusion specialists. Historically, it had been one person that was at all 3 campuses. They all serve multiple campuses. And this year was the first year we had 3 separate people for our 3 separate campuses. And that felt to be really challenging because again, those 3 people also have multiple campuses. And so working around schedules, working around those pieces, we're really hoping to, find a way next year to have that one trusted person that can just kind of fold into the campus culture and support our work. Okay, and then just to highlight some student achievements, I always praise ESOC's work. I don't think anybody knows how hard she works, how closely connected she is to our students and their families, and like just an integral part of the campus culture. And so what she's done this year with some of her peer groups, and ESOC, you can add anything if you'd like, but the peer group and the student group with SOAR, and they're going to start running restorative circles for peers on campus. And also we have permission from both principals for her to run restorative circles at Covington Middle School starting next year. So we're working on a plan for this. This is like a huge achievement part, just thinking of, again, the sustainability piece, but also thinking of the impact and the need for student voice on our campuses. So that is something that we're really excited about. And then another exciting achievement, and I've heard this, spoken about a couple of times in some of the sessions, but ALC, or Alternative Schools, they created a plan and changed their entire school schedule to include 50 minutes of focused SEL lessons each day. So the students start with a check-in with a trusted adult on campus. It could be a counselor, somebody from CIS, their advisory teacher, an LMHP. It could be one of the mentors. But they start with a check-in every day with a trusted adult on campus, and they move into first period, which is a 50-minute focused SEL lesson. And that's huge, especially as teachers were just overwhelmed with the needs of students. And again, moving through their own personal needs this year and returning to school. And they said, like, hey, we need some time with our kids to just connect with them. We have a really high need for teaching students executive functioning skills now that they're back to face-to-face, social skills support. And so they identified just the entire first period as a daily way for them to connect and have focused SEL lessons. And that could be different things. It could be a restorative circle. It could be an actual lesson around something that they're seeing. And just as a reminder, students at ALC are placed there between 2 and 20 days. So they chose to do it daily because they said, we don't want to do this Fridays, and kids miss out on it. We want to do it daily and have it be a part of our culture. So yeah, that's just our little small but mighty presentation about youth trauma. And also my heart goes out to each of you that are working with our youth. I never miss an opportunity when I talk to anybody in the district or outside to just praise our educators. And I always tell people, think a teacher, think an educator, think a principal. Y'all know this is like heavy and hard heart work. And we have all experienced a lot of things returning to schools this year. So thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Or Isak, did I miss anything you'd like to add?
I think you're good.
That was terrific. Really awesome presentation, and love to hear the work that you're doing, and really the piece about restorative justice and making sure it comes back to the native roots is super important, and something that I'm glad that message came through today. So thank you. Anybody have any questions? I know we're a little bit on the late side for break, but I want to give everybody a chance to ask a question or two, and then we'll still give you your break, and we'll just come back to the next session a little bit on the late side as well. Anybody have any questions for Rebecca or Isaac? All right. Let's head to break, and we'll be back at 3:25. Thank you very much. All three panels, man, you all were amazing and inspiring. Thank you very much. And looking forward to the next one as well. So we'll see you at 3:25. Thanks a lot.